So yeah, welcome to tonight's program. This is a part of a series called Ready, Set, Garden. It's presented by the Wadsworth Public Library with the generous support of the Bird Park Community Garden Committee. And if you're looking for any more information about the garden, you can go to wadsworthlibrary.com/garden. There's some other videos and other information that's up there on the site. Our hosts tonight are Kevin and Carolyn Keiper from Keiper Farm Stand. And if you know the Keipers, they are just a tremendous wealth of information when it comes to anything farming or gardening. So without further ado, I will turn it over to them and enlighten us.
Okay. Well, we started the community garden last year, kind of a little bit late, but we got it going. It actually, everybody was able to get a little bit of a crop. It was a first time thing for everybody. We all kind of learned together. We're still learning. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions to start with. You're more than welcome to interrupt and ask a question. I don't really have a set in stone agenda. Tonight we're working on a no-till strip. We have a water service in the line here, so we decided to make this no-till so that we didn't have to worry about somebody tilling up the water service like we just kind of missed it last year. I don't know how that happened, but we missed it.
God provided.
So this year we're going to do no-till in this section, so that it's a new idea for people who have never maybe seen no-till gardening, or it's also called, there can be lasagna gardening, where you just make layers of your compost, your mulch, you plant right in it, you just kind of move your top soil a little bit, plant down in it, pull your mulch back in, and you're good to go with keeping a nice soil structure. Usually there's a lot of worms in there. We're trying a straw bale garden this year, which is what our straw bales over here are for. It's a learning curve for all of us. I haven't done it either. I thought it was a good idea to give it a try so everybody could see it. It's a very easy way for somebody who maybe has a hard time getting down on the ground to do a little bit of gardening. It's not going to be a huge amount, or somebody who doesn't really have a good place to garden. Because there's a lot of shade at your house, you can put a straw bale almost anywhere that you have some sunshine. It'll be right on your driveway. You just have to keep it watered. So we have our compost bin, so anytime anybody has any extra compost, clippings, anything out of the garden that they don't want, as long as it's not diseased, it goes straight into our compost bin. Somebody moves it from one bin to the next, and at some point we'll have finished compost and people are allowed to use the compost in their garden. We have some seed starting things that we need to work on. Everybody needs to start either seeds or you go buy your plants. If you have specific varieties of tomatoes or peppers that you want, and you can't always go find seeds or plants, you need to start your seeds. A heat mat, a good source of light, whether it's a shop light, a plant grow light, a window, someplace that has an adequate amount of sunshine, at least 10 hours a day probably. During early spring, you're going to have to supplement that. I put a timer on all my grow lights and turn them on and off for about 16 hours a day. In all reality, I don't even bother turning on and off anymore. I just plug it into a timer and let that take care of it. I grow on a heat mat. It's always a beneficial way to start pepper seeds, because peppers take up a lot of energy just trying to get started, and if they're sitting in cold soil, they'll just start to decay. They won't even grow. So if you have a special variety you want, make sure you have a heat mat, make sure you have an adequate amount of sunshine or light. Do not overwater your seedlings. Do not overwater your plants. One thing I will tell you I would never use is seed starting mix. I don't use a seed starting mix. It's too fine, it compacts, it absorbs too much water. So then your plants tend to start rotting. You get fungus gnats because you keep thinking you need to add some water, and then the fungus gnats just compound your problem. So you kind of, a little bit of less watering is kinder than too much water. You don't want to kill them with kindness. So take your time to put your finger in there and make sure it really needs a drink before you start just adding a little bit of water.
What's your ideal mix for seed starting? What do you like to do?
I actually buy a bale of Bacto. It's a brand, and it's a soilless mix. I never buy anything that would have soil in it. I usually sift out some of the bigger pieces. I sift through, the black web mats or trays that you get plants in at the greenhouse. I just sift through one of those. I don't even make it really small pieces. If you're trying to build a mix, you would add perlite, some vermiculite. I also buy Osmocote, and if you want to go totally organic, you're not going to put in synthetic fertilizer. Osmocote's slow release fertilizer. I usually put that in when I'm transplanting, but not for a seed mix itself. You can buy a lot of those bales of Bacto or Hyphenex, whatever brand it is. You can get them at the Lowe's, Home Depot. They're all pretty standard. There's different brands. I've not found a really bad one, but I suppose it could happen. I don't use compost from outside when I'm starting seeds. I don't use any soil. I don't reuse soil or the potting mix. I don't reuse it to start seeds in. I always sanitize my containers. I never use dirty containers to start seeds in with bleach water or peroxide. You can even use vinegar water to clean your containers. You don't want to introduce pathogens that are going to kill off your seeds. So, any other questions? Please feel free to ask.
Do you use peat moss for anything?
Only it's in my basic Bacto mix. I don't go buy peat moss specifically to bring home and put in the mix. I don't put it in the garden. Not to say you can't, I just don't do it.
Could you talk about planning? Like, how many of each kind am I going to grow, and how do I figure that out? Right?
Well, that's a very good question. How big is your garden space? A seed packet generally is enough seeds for a 50-foot row. Most of us aren't going to plant a 50-foot row of carrots. I mean, some people will, but yeah, share your seeds. And not everybody, like corn, you're going to want that the north side of your garden where it's the tallest. You're going to plant that in blocks. Nobody's going to plant a single row of corn. It will not pollinate well, so you're going to have like an ear of corn that has really big, strangely shaped kernels, and then you're going to have a spot of just cob. So you're going to have to make sure that you plant your corn in blocks.
Something probably not here, I imagine. In that case.
I would imagine most people wouldn't want to plant corn up here, but at home, most people want a little bit of corn maybe. Your tallest goes at the back, your shortest would go at the front, or the south side to the west side. All of us have specific things we like or don't like. Don't plant something you're not going to eat. That's a total waste of energy and a space in a garden.
You mentioned the south side. Is that because it gets more sun? You want to plant short things there?
Yes, you're not going to make shade. So if you're making shade, your plants will not fruit.
Okay.
I had a row of peppers a few years ago, and I planted them on the west side of a row of apple trees, but that was the very east side of my garden, and they did not fruit. I did not get peppers in the section where the trees were at, the apple trees, until way at the end of summer. They just didn't do well to set blossoms. They didn't have enough sunshine. Green beans, you can buy bush beans or you can buy pole beans. If you like pole beans, you keep those all summer long. But they don't, I'm not going to tell you they won't produce as many as bush beans will. Bush beans you pick about 3 times and you're done with the row. You would start over with something else or another row of beans. They actually, if you leave them in, sometimes they'll regrow enough. They add nitrogen to your ground, so try not to rip all the roots out. Cut them off and put your bean plants in a compost pile or a compost bin. The roots will have little nodules on them, and that adds nitrogen back to the garden once they start to break down. Peas tend to, I'm not sure if it's the whole area, but peas tend to turn yellow. They start yellow at the bottom and go clear to the top of the plant. Don't plant peas in the same spot the next year. You're going to have to rotate your crops from one spot in the garden to the next. So you kind of have to pre-plan what you're going to do. If you don't have space to do that, container gardening might help out. Straw bale gardening might help out. And if you have something that totally is continually a problem, change up your plants. Just don't grow it. It's not worth the stress that it creates trying to get a crop out of something that doesn't grow well. And it's just because it could be there are pathogens in the ground that they live from one year to the next. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, sure.
Airflow. I have a tendency to pack everything really closely, and I think I'm defeating myself.
You very
would you
well could
recommend?
be. Yeah. Where we're at, we're kind of like at the bottom of a hollow. So we don't have an enormous amount of airflow, but you want your airflow, your garden kind of laid out where it's going to get prevailing wind to blow through your garden. Not that the air sits in your garden, and especially tomatoes are probably about the worst. The wind doesn't move around, and they tend to get blight very quickly. So try to keep a prevailing wind going through your garden, not against the garden. It's a very easy thing to try to pack too many things right into a small space. Make sure you're giving your plants enough room to grow. They're really small when they start. I have a tray of broccoli here. And we're going to sacrifice it in somebody's garden tonight, a couple of them anyhow. But this is broccoli. I mean, it's not very big, but you need 3 feet for that plant. You need to plan on it taking up an adequate amount of space when you're planting. When you pack too many things in there, you tend to get insects and diseases very quickly.
Another good example for that, I planted some turnips over here, and the ones that I took, actually, you can even see in my old plot where I started them, they grew so tight together. We tried to thin, but we were not aggressive enough. The ones that came out of the community plots were huge compared to the ones that were all packed in. I was thinking, ooh, I'll get a lot of harvest. No, it's not true at all. So
give them their space.
Yeah.
They do need an adequate amount of space. And they're going to compete for nutrients. So if you don't have a nice rich soil, you're going to need to add some nutrients. I use a lot of a chicken manure based one called Replenish. I buy it at Yoder's Produce down in Millersburg. I buy a lot of my greenhouse supplies there. It's kind of a low nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus blend. It's kind of rich. I mean, you don't use a whole lot of it. So make sure you add a little bit of compost or a little bit of fertilizer throughout the summer. It's probably about once a month, maybe every 6 weeks, so that those plants are getting adequate nutrition. Otherwise, your produce won't taste very good if it produces much at all. Anything else? David, what else did we want to talk about? There was move on to the compost, straw bale garden stuff.
right,
yeah.
we could talk about some of that, and then the transplanting process, right? Because we're not going to have another session before planting happens. We can maybe talk a little bit about that and how that works to get into the ground eventually.
Yeah, the straw bale gardening, it's kind of going to be a new process for all of us, and this is just going to be the start of it tonight, because I'm not going to come up you can grab the other one. You wet your bales down with several gallons of water. It's supposed to rain tonight and tomorrow, so I don't have to worry about it too much. And you just pour water on your bales just until they start to absorb the moisture for the next couple of days. You do this for a couple days, and then you add some fertilizer on top of it. So since I'm not going to be up here for the next couple days because I'm busy, that's just my life, I'm going to take my handy dandy I'm going to poke a hole, and I'm just going to set my jugs here so that they have a little bit of water coming out, just to continually wet that bale so it doesn't run right all over the ground. Then I'm going to sacrifice my next jug. So the next time I come back up here, I'm going to put fertilizer on top of these bales so they start to decompose the straw, and then we'll plant straight in the bales in May so that we have a crop coming in the plot here so that we can donate it to the food bank or anybody who would need, a meal somewhere. That's what we tried to do last year, was anything that we as a garden group produced, we tried to donate it to anybody in the area that were to need a meal or two. We gave it to the Salvation Army last year.
And to Nowchers too. The beans.
Okay. Yeah.
Harvested. Yep.
Oh, good. Yeah, I know there was some peppers up here. I don't know if anybody got any of them. By the time I came back up, the deer kept eating them off. Animals are part of life, and you tend to have to fence off your garden. If you, as right behind us, you can see somebody did a very good job of trying to protect their garden last year from the wildlife. And up here, it's really easy for the wildlife to come out of the woods and nibble off everything every night. So it's kind of stressful when you're trying to get a garden and you're depending on a crop. You have to spend a little bit of effort protecting.
You mentioned soap and softener.
Yeah, we hang softener sheets on our apple trees at home, and little bars of soap just to keep the deer out of our trees so they don't eat off all of our flower buds during the winter, because they're fairly nutritious. We don't want I'm not eating the deer. I mean, I could, but I'm not going to.
I think Carolyn Gary's going to be doing a thing on.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. Yeah, we have bird netting and PVC pipes so that you can see a little bit of a deterrent to keep at least the groundhogs out, hopefully, and keep the deer from walking through and just eating off all of our crops. Our milk jugs, I'm going to sacrifice a few plants because I'm not going to be up here. This is going to become a miniature greenhouse. As soon as we're done here, we're going to plant a few of these plants over there, and then this is a really easy way to get some earlier spring crops in. It's supposed to get pretty chilly in the next few nights. So then you can just put your little jug over top of your plant and leave it for a few days. You want to go out and check it every now and then, just because, if they blow off, you want to put them back on. But we'll mound a little bit of dirt around it. It makes everybody pretty much could get a milk jug anywhere. If they make really easy miniature greenhouses, you could actually plant a few seeds in one. It's called winter sowing. People do a lot of milk jug recycling and put their seeds out in the milk jug for the whole winter. And then as soon as spring comes, they start doing their magical growing, and they're pretty hardy. And then as soon as you have plants that you're ready to plant outside, you're not going to want to take your greenhouse things that you've just gone and bought, most likely, unless you get them from me, because I don't baby my stuff. It goes outside and it stays outside. You're not going to want to take your stuff out and just put it right in the garden. You're going to want to make sure that it gets acclimatized to the sunshine. Otherwise, you can burn your plants off in the first day because they get too much sunshine. They're too tender. So make sure you're either covering them up or you're taking them out a little bit each day and then bring them back in, or put them in the shade for a whole day before you get them into the sunshine before you do your gardening. Yes?
What if you buy it as a small plant, like a tomato plant? Same thing?
You do not want to just take it and put it right straight out in the garden unless it's been sitting outside already. If it's not been sitting outside, most likely you'll probably burn it. If you're doing your own growing, you're still going to want to take it outside for a little bit each day before you take it outside all day long in the sunshine.
How long would you do that for?
A couple days at least. Depends on the weather outside. If you have tomato plants, don't put them outside if it's less than probably 45, 50 degrees. Once it's that cold, the cell formation starts to get deformed as it's making flower blossoms. And when they make flower blossoms, they come out with zippers and holes, and they're called cap facing. That's from the cold weather in the spring. So they've been outside and exposed to too cold a weather while they were growing. Okay? Anything else? David, are we ready to sacrifice a few plants to your garden?
One other question I had actually was related to, I've got these little seedlings. Do you ever do transplant into larger pots before you transplant into the garden?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, when you're running out of root space, you don't want to get your plants too root bound. Because then if you take them outside and they're really hard roots growing in circles around the pot, you really need to take a knife can cut down the sides of your pots or your root ball so that it can start expanding. Otherwise, it might just continue to grow in a circle and it never establishes a very good root system. So you can pot that up into a little bit bigger of a pot so that you're not watering and watering's running straight through because there's no soil left.
Right. Is there a specific plant variety that you would always do at least a transplant before you put it in the garden, or is it more based on size of your starting container?
I would say mostly because you're running out of plant space in your original pot.
So you keep an eye on that by like peeking at it every once in a while. Do you try to pull it up, or how do you judge when it's full?
Well, if the bottom of every pot that you're going to get from any place,
Yeah.
you're going to see the roots start coming out. Once you get a whole lot of roots starting to come out, you're going to notice, or it's hard to water. The water runs straight through. You want to give it a little, pull them out. You don't have to be too terrible gentle. But once they, this isn't that root bound. But you could take a knife or a pair of scissors and just cut down the side of the root ball before you put it in the garden so that those roots can start expanding out instead of in its circle. And you can use lots of different materials to start your seeds in. Gary brought a few things for us. Is it okay if I use it, Gary?
By all means.
Okay. Egg cartons are fabulous. He did a great job of putting even little holes in them. I would do that for styrofoam. I wouldn't do it for paper, but that's just I'm lazy.
Would you sanitize that before you use it, or is it good
No.
from the store?
Nah, I wouldn't worry about unless if it was dirty.
Okay. All right.
There's a trash can, and he also has handy dandy little pots that look like wood. They're toilet paper holders. So he turned them into pots. He wet them down and he squared them up, cut the bottoms, and smushed them together. There's also a plant maker, a pot maker. You can make pots out of newspaper. There's soil block making. You can make a really wet mix, and it has a peat-based mix, they compress it into almost like a spring-form mold. And then you don't even have any debris like the plastic trays that I would have. You don't have any debris left over when you're out planting your garden. And they don't get root bound. That's called air pruning. Those little soil blocks, magically, I don't know how the air keeps them from, the roots from going out. They just stop growing their roots. And it works out very well. But I don't have time to do it. Or like $500 for the soil blocking stuff. I just haven't tried it. So, I'm not sure if there's, and I guess when you're watering, make sure a lot of people have city water. You'll want to let your water sit out for a day. If you have small amounts of watering to do, the plants don't like chlorine real well. So if you're watering with straight city tap water, they sometimes tend to suffer because the chlorine is not a good fit for your plants. So you just let that sit out in a bucket and the chlorine will dissipate and they'll do much better. So, and I don't use Miracle Grow. It's a miracle if they grow, is what I say.
Aww.
Yeah, I'm serious. I don't like Miracle Grow, and I wouldn't advocate. I would tell you use Job's. If you're going to go buy a fertilizer, go get something like Job's. Tomato Tone. There's a couple of other brands. They're organic based. I would tell you to use those first. I'm not real excited about the blue miracle-y stuff.
Oh, it's such a nice tint.
Yeah.
And the urea smell that comes off of it, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm allergic to that, so I don't. Yeah.
All right.
So anyhow.
So Carolyn, we
Yes.
do right now have 3 no-till plots available
Okay.
if people are interested in trying to do that.
Yep. And if you want to do the straw bale gardening, I will tell you, it used to be pretty economical. I would say most of the people who would want to do straw bale gardening now would be because you don't have someplace in the sunshine, or it's hard to get down on the ground. I paid $8 for each of those bales today. And I'm like, yeah, those are kind of pricey, but I sacrificed it for up here. So it was a good sacrifice. So, everybody, and we're going to put stakes around those, so because eventually they would just fall over. We'll pound some stakes around them. Might get some twine or something and tie it to, just so they can't go anywhere. because I don't know what we'll plant in them. Something. We'll plant something. So, anything else? Gary, did you have anything?
No, not really. You're talking about seedlings starting. I find that I start my flowers from seeds. I don't start my plants because it's so cheap to buy plants. Then you get tomato plants this big. It's just easier in my garden. And of course, you plant, if the tomato plant is this big, you only leave this much above the ground.
Yeah, that is very true, Gary. That's a very good point. When you have tomato plants, they will root the whole way down the stem, as deep as you can plant them. You pick off the leaves and you dig a trench and you lay it sideways, or you dig it down deep, whichever works for you. Sometimes by the time you're ready to plant your garden, they might be a good almost 2 foot tall or long, and they're a mess. But you can plant the whole stem. Peppers, you can plant them a little bit deep. Even our broccoli, when we go to plant it, I'll pick off this leaf and we'll plant up to the leaf on the broccoli and the cabbage, because they'll also make roots down the stem. So some things you wouldn't get. Go ahead.
What do you like to use for mulch?
Oh, I like wood chips really, really well. If you can get somebody who does a lot of tree service, get them to dump you a load of wood chips, as long as you don't get any black walnut. Wood chips would be my favorite. I do tend to use a lot of plastic at home, just because we do a lot of gardening, and I just don't have the energy and the manpower to shovel that many chips ever. But we do drip tape and plastic. It's not my favorite thing to do, but wood chips would be my favorite. I do one garden in wood chips, because
They've got to be aged, don't they?
yes, you let them sit for a year before you use them. And they add a lot of nice organic material to your soil. Yeah.
What I do, I use newspaper a lot, and then I don't use chemicals on my yard, so I mow my yard and catch it and put the grass clippings on top of the paper. I haven't weeded it in years.
Yeah.
Easy.
When my father-in-law would shred all of his paper, I would have bales and bales and bales, big black bags of newspaper shreddings. I really appreciated them, because I just had to go to the top of the garage and get them and drag them to the garden. So, yeah, newspaper works really well. I would tell you not sheet newspaper, but shred it, just because if the wind blows it, at least you don't have great big sheets of newspaper like wrapped around your shrubs at the house or at the neighbor's house. So, yeah. Any other questions? I mean, there's lots of things we can talk about. I honestly can't remember all of them. There's just so many things.
Have you ever heard about adding eggshells to the bottom of the hole before you put the plant in?
I do. I throw all my compost out in the garden. Everything goes in a bucket in the house, and I just dump it out there. I throw my eggshells in. I don't know that it really helps one way or the other.
There is a way that eggshells work real well.
But
And I have the same bucket under my sink at home, and everything goes in it. Anyway, eggshells, what I do when I get a whole bunch of them, and I save them in the egg carton. I don't throw them away. I put them in the blender. I'm going to have a couple dozen shells in there, some water, and blender makes a very nice slurry. I use it on the tomatoes so I don't get blossom end rot. And it works good. You can also use lime. Just throw some lime in a jug with some water, pour it on.
And honestly, if we have sour milk, I pour the milk out in the garden. I don't dump it down the drain. There's lots of calcium there too. So I'm not afraid to put that stuff out. Lots of compost.
Milk's good for powdery mildew too.
Yep, you can dilute that to 10% spray, and spray that on your tomato plants. And I will tell you, invest in a pressure sprayer. They are the simplest things to have in the garden, and always don't. If you're going to use one for like an herbicide, okay, I'm just going to say not everybody doesn't use them. Always keep your sprayers separate. Never recontaminate a sprayer you would spray on your plants. You can put soapy water in them. You can put milk in them, whatever it is. You just pump them up and you just spray. It's such a much simpler thing than trying to squirt a bottle. So milk is a great powdery mildew preventative.
Where would you see powdery mildew? What kind of plants would you usually see that on?
Mostly you would see that on tomatoes, sunflowers, cucumbers, pumpkins, anything that has a nice, great, big, huge leaf that looks like little spots of cotton or powder, just little ones. The first thing I would do is pop off the leaf. If I see little spots of powdery mildew, don't drop it on the ground. Put it in a trash bag and get rid of it. If you have any disease on your plant, don't put it on the ground.
Don't put it in compost.
Yeah, don't put it in your compost. Put it in a trash bag. Throw it away. You don't want to reintroduce it back into your garden. Speaking of reintroducing, if you use stakes or tomato cages and you have blight, make sure you sanitize those cages or those stakes. Spray them with Clorox water. Spray them off. Make sure you clean those off from one year to the next. Your tools should be cleaned from at the end of the season. Spray them down with Clorox. Spray them down with something to sanitize them. You can use hydrogen peroxide. You can use vinegar. Make sure you clean your tools. Make sure you clean your cages, your stakes, whatever you use. You don't want to reintroduce pathogens from one year to the next. Anything else?
Carolyn, if we wanted to plant something over spring break, Wadsworth spring break is this Friday to this week coming up. What might we be able to plant during this time of year?
I would say your broccolis, your cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts, lettuce. You could get some peas in. We have peas up already.
What about beans?
Spinach. Not beans. No, you would not want to put out beans. You could probably put out beets, radishes.
Turnips.
Yep, some turnips.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot you could get planted out. But once again, if you're not going to eat it, don't spend your time planting it just because you can get it out there.
And don't plant it in that row, this row, or that row if you have a plot.
Yeah. I
So,
sent out emails.
good. Yeah.
Yep.
So we had planted some kale last year, and we thought it was all dead, and we left it over the winter, and the spring would come out, and there's a little one growing leaves on it. Do you think that would be a viable plant right now?
I actually just ate some out of David's garden.
My own plot.
I just ate his. Yeah, it was tasty. But this year it'll flower and it'll go to seed. So I would say harvest your leaves as long as you can.
Okay.
So yeah, the cold weather makes them taste better.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Especially Brussels sprouts.
Well, and you can keep the seed too if it does. This is a strain that I've had for the past 5 or 6 years, and I just leave some over winter, and then I get more seed, and I plant it, and it actually sells seed sometimes too.
Yeah.
So it's a great crop for that kind of activity, especially in this part of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that with. I've honestly never had cabbage actually winter over and get seeds, so I'm thankful for whoever grows cabbage seeds because I have never seen a cabbage seed in my life in my garden. I have no idea where they come from. So, but kale, kale, mustard greens. If you do any mustard greens, you could get those in the garden too. This is a good time of the year to get any of those crops in.
How about potatoes?
Put them in.
Yeah.
Get your potatoes in. Yeah.
I got a bin.
Yeah.
Onion sets?
I don't know why you couldn't. We were down to Berlin last week and I saw a whole field of onions sticking out of black plastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gross.
So.
Anything that makes your breath smell that bad, you shouldn't eat.
Oh, come on, Gary! Come on!
Gary, we don't eat onions at our house either.
Yeah,
Or
and
my-
garlic. Roasted garlic.
Oh, no, I like garlic.
That makes your breath stink.
Yeah, but my wife likes it too, so it's no problem.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
She likes
gotcha.
onions.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So what's growing over there in the fenced-in area?
That's garlic.
That is our resident gardener from last year. He bought his 2 plots for 2 years, and he started his garlic last year so that he would have, because we don't allow you to keep stuff in the garden over the winter unless you've purchased your plot for the next year already, so that you can grow garlic. We don't allow any perennials up here because it's obviously it would be too much to try to work around that for somebody cleaning up the garden, and like we need to still pick up all of our little row separators, and we'll till all of the plots then. So.
And he also was able to plant above ground. So they did the garlic, and then they also planted above ground and harvested, and then over the winter the garlic. So he used that thoroughly, I guess, through 12, 15, 16 months now?
Yeah, he had it for a long time. He had some really beautiful plants in there.
Yeah.
He had a really nice garden. He was out here every day.
Oh, yeah.
And if you want to do something like that, that's prime activity for this row. Why we set that apart for that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm not sure whose plot that is, but all of that stuff will have to come out, and so that we can till up the garden in the next, in May.
Sometime in May.
Yeah, whenever the weather's suitable. It's beautiful now, but by the time it's ready for everybody to plant, would need to till again anyways. So I could keep answering questions, but yeah.
Do you want to plant some broccoli?
We sure could. You want to grab that, and I have my handy dandy $1 trowel, so that instead, if you buy tools, buy the best ones you can afford. But you're going to lose them, buy cheap ones. So David, is there any place you would like this in particular?
I was thinking, since they are going to get bigger, we could do just 4 of them in the middle right here.
Oh, sure.
That's my thought.
Yeah. And we're going to, my handy dandy tomato tone. It doesn't matter that it's not tomatoes. It's okay. Well,
That's good stuff. The Espoma brand is, I like that Espoma.
This is my favorite fertilizer, honestly.
Me too.
I use it in my hanging baskets.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we just put down.
Maybe we could show the bin over here.
That'd be great.
What's that? This is my Amish rototiller.
Did you use it across there to break that up?
No, I use my mattock
Okay.
and then a hoe to get this all, and a little cultivator.
And honestly, your tools, really, you can use your tools to measure in your garden. This is 12 inches. So when you're measuring, you can flip, you get three trowel lengths is your 3 feet. So David's going to get his, you want cabbage or broccoli? Do you
Whichever, don't care.
I don't care either. Okay, this one's going to be cabbage. And then we're just going to cover it right up. And this, we're going to put his leaves underneath there.
You don't need to water it first?
We will in a minute.
Oh, okay.
We'll have our little top off there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But actually, I'll probably have to go harvest some water from my other.
Okay.
That's another thing, is the water source will not be available until around tilling time. So if you are going to plant ahead of time, plan on toting your own water.
Is the water fountain available in the bathroom?
The bathroom's available.
The bathroom would have water in it if you really
is the
had to,
bathroom
maybe?
open yet?
I don't know.
This is May 1st. The sign
May
is
1st? Yep.
So-
So you'd have to bring your own water, which I'm prepared to do, so that's fine.
Oh, that's cabbage. Let's do a broccoli. Now, I don't know what kind of broccoli it is.
Whatever.
I was down getting some stuff for my greenhouse, and they had a couple trays of
Nice.
already started stuff a few weeks ago.
You get 1 head of broccoli out of each plant, ideally? Is that how it works?
It depends on the variety.
Oh.
Some varieties you'll get 1 nice head, and you might get some side shoots. But a lot of the varieties actually make a lot of nice side shoots. So you're getting a bunch of little ones all summer long.
Oh.
So you just give them a...
In the store, they'll try to sell those to you as broccolini.
Oh.
So yeah, and then we can... Since it's going to rain, it's probably not a big deal to take my water from there.
guys have plants for sale now?
I have a greenhouse out on Mennonite Road, but it's not really time to.
These kind of plants we'd have some.
I just have a little bit of this stuff. Most people don't come for anything for the garden this time of the year.
Yeah, when I go to Acme Farmers Market, I guess.
Yeah. Yep. So, then all you have to do is put your little bit of soil around the milk jugs so that they don't really blow away too fast. But it's a really easy way to get an early crop in the garden. Put a little bit of a cloak over top of it, and you're good to go for the next couple of weeks. Eventually it's going to grow out of that size, obviously, so, for a little next...
Keep the gophers out.
Yeah, it'll keep them from getting at least eaten off tonight, I hope. What's that? Yeah, we'll probably have, Oh yeah, it's supposed to be really nice and warm on
Saturday. So
Yeah, you don't want to
someone's
leave
got
it out
to
when
pull
it's
those off.
60 degrees out.
Thursday.
Yeah, you can leave them there for Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, right. So talking of temperatures, so you would want to pull these off when it's sunny
Absolutely.
out, probably.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, and above like 50 degrees, something like that.
You'll cook it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
We came home one time and forgot to open a greenhouse up that we had 120 tomatoes growing in. And when we got home, it was 122 degrees in the greenhouse.
No way.
Yeah.
They were done.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of a sad. And I wouldn't necessarily probably use one of these white milk jugs for out here, but if it's all you have, just use it. Don't want to cut up your.
Lord.
You don't want to cut off your finger.
No, I'm not worried about my fingers. I'd be worried about his cord. my finger will heal.
A little solder fixes many ills.
And if you're really thrifty, David, on the other
What?
side of the bag over there are some magic markers. Would you bring me those?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is perfect. We'll just use this and sacrifice this. Don't forget to mark your rows, especially if you have or your plants if you're doing specific tomatoes in your garden, because you'll never remember what tomato is what. These are industrial Sharpie markers or a Milwaukee contractor's marker. Don't use a regular Sharpie marker in the garden, because within a couple of weeks it'll be faded off. This will last all summer long, these contractor markers. So make sure you can get, you can use milk jugs, you can use paint stirring sticks, you can use shims, tongue depressors, popsicle sticks. Write your varieties, especially if you're growing something like black creme tomatoes and Cherokee and a bunch of different maybe heirloom varieties, so that you know which one is which. Some of them look very, very similar from one plant to the next.
Now, where do you get those markers at?
Amazon. I just bought a couple of
Lowe's.
Sharpie does make an indelible marker.
Yeah, these are down at the registers at the contractor's end at Lowe's. They're usually in packs of 3 or 4, just hanging on the cash register part. I'm sure I got the Sharpies there too. But yeah, you just go up to Lowe's or Home Depot. You can get them at a contractor's place where they would. There's wax China pens, those China markers. It's kind of like
Grease
a wax.
pen?
Yeah, it's kind of like a black wax pen. You can write on things that doesn't come off either.
Dressed up.
Where's my hoe? Oh yeah, there's a rake. There's my rake and my hoe. I take my hoe handle and I make measurements on my hoe handle, so I don't have a tape measure out in the garden, because it's just another thing to keep track of. And I make 6-inch and 12-inch, 15, 18, and 22 or 25-inch marks on my hoe handle, so that I can kind of keep my rows straight from one end to the next, distance apart. Or if I need to, like if I'm planting specific plants, I can keep my tomatoes at 22 inches or my peppers at 15 inches and be pretty consistent about it going down the row. So that, especially if you have a specific number of plants that you have purchased for a specific area, you're not sure, or have a whole bunch of them left over and think, how am I going to fit them in somewhere?
Sometimes what we'll do on crops that we're planting that are real large spacings like watermelon or cantaloupe is we'll take a piece of PVC pipe and sharpen the two ends to the exact length we want, and we can just flip it up and over the whole way down the row and make holes through the plastic exactly where we want to plant. Yeah. It saves a lot of time.
Yeah, here's my hoe handle, and I just use one of my indelible markers, one of my Sharpies, and I just make you could use a paint pen if you wanted to use paint, but I just mark my handle a new mark every year because I eventually wear it off. And this is probably one of my favorite hoes. It has a nice little curved blade for the head. It doesn't take up a whole lot of soil. I just want to cut off plants. I don't want to till my garden with a hoe. I don't have that much energy. This is David's hoe. This is called a scuffle hoe or a stirrup hoe. It's really nice for small gardening or early gardening. It cuts off the plants. You want to cut off the weeds at the roots. You don't want to, and you can go back and forth. Right now it's a little bit hard, but it cuts the top layer of soil right off, so you're cutting the roots right off of the top of the plant, because you don't want to rebury live roots in a whole plant, because then you kind of defeated your purpose. This is a nice rake for getting a bed even so that you can plant maybe little rows of lettuce, little seeds, something you don't have to like mark every 6 inches or whatever, but it makes nice little rows. The other side, kind of gets out a little bit of, larger rocks, because I'm not sure if anybody doesn't have rocks in the garden. I know I have a few. I think I have a quarry. So. Oh my goodness, sorry, Jerry.
As Carolyn said, we have had some problem with animals, deer, rabbits, maybe possums, certainly raccoons. So I use this device at home to cover up my blueberries and strawberries so the birds and the chipmunks can get through it, but the other animals can't. So I'll give a quick demonstration of what we do. We put, I'll just go over this part that we have here. Now we can space this a lot farther, but just demonstration purposes.
That's 3/4 PVC, Gary?
Yes. No, this is 1 inch.
1 inch, okay.
I don't know where my other one went.
Wait until they're out of your way.
And these come in 10-foot sections. One of these is about $2.50.
Now that's PEX, or what is that?
No, it's PVC, plain old PVC.
And that's 1/2 inch, or 3?
This is 1/2 inch.
All right.
It won't go. This will not go into 3/4 inch. I don't know where my other short one is. Like if you have a lot longer span, you can.
Did you pick the one that was in the lawn up there?
That's probably where I dropped it, trying to bring everything. That's okay. I don't know where my other long one is. But then we have. Where's my netting? Oh, here it is. This netting is 14 by 14. I'm not going to unwrap it, but it's 14 feet by 14 feet, and you can just drape it over there, and you can use a 2x4 or some stones or something, and it does keep the animals out. It's that simple. Just I don't know where my other 10-footer
So
is.
that's tree net, Gary, that you got in your hand?
No,
what is that?
This is called tree netting. This is $10 at Ace Hardware, but you can use it. I've had it. I know I've had it 10 years. The one, so you'd use it year after year after year, and it does a really good job. It's that simple. You can cover your 10 feet in no time at all. And I'm not sure about how it might go this way, and so you might want to plan your garden that this something right here is a little shorter than what you have here in the middle. Well, there it is.
But the downside of that is then you get a little shade, so you gotta have to balance the. It's a balancing act a little bit that way then.
Well, let's go.
Because south is that way
We'll
for
go
us.
do the whole demonstration.
Yeah.
Just don't hit your thumb with it. And I mentioned if you can put one in this long and extend it a little bit. But that's simple. If you put the netting over it, you're done.
And then you pull the net off to work in the garden
Yes,
and put it,
yeah.
pull it back over.
Yeah, exactly.
You could use something as simple as pegs just to peg down the bird netting so that,
That's even better.
Staples or something.
yeah, staples, pegs. Don't use the real shiny ones. Use ones that you've had in the garden for a year already because they're nice and rusty and they don't pull out very well. They're hard to get out. And when they're brand new, this plastic stuff, it goes everywhere. Trust me. Ask me how I know.
Yeah.
Any questions about that? It's
Wait.
again, it's pretty easy to do, and it works well. You kind of have to plan your garden so it doesn't get in the way.
But you could always go taller and then make.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what
with
the
those,
longer ones are.
yeah.
You can get taller.
Yeah, we do something very similar. We use T-posts and then we
Yeah, this you
arch it
could
a little
even-
bit narrower because we put it over our blueberries. We
Yeah.
cover our blueberries from the birds. And it's tall enough so we can walk under it.
Yeah, this you can actually, and then you get a little bit more room with the bigger ones on the edge.
The only thing you'd have to watch then, at least here, is our 6 foot limit, right? So you wouldn't want the
Well,
hoop
yeah.
to go over 6 foot because then you start casting shadows on the people behind you.
Well, they aren't going to
I
cast any
wouldn't-
shadow with
yeah,
that.
that's not
Okay.
going to do much of a shadow.
All
Yeah.
right. As long as you're using a big
Yeah,
net.
6
like
foot
you've got.
plants are a problem, but
Okay.
netting is not going to do anything.
No. I got to uncover my strawberries. This is going to go over my strawberries.
Nice.
I got second year of my strawberries this year. So it should be.
Oh, I forgot to water
Really
yours
good.
today. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Well, we're about right on time here.
Back to you.
Well, I don't really have a whole lot more other than I do have, I call it my Amish rototiller because I got it from the Amish. But, if you don't have a need for a big heavy rototiller, once you have it tilled once, this you can turn it over and you can, just like the scuffle hoe, it has a nice blade on the one side and you can just go through your little plants and scuffle everything off on one side, or you can go through the other side and this is much harder. I go through the garden like
work,
this.
isn't
It is. I'm like, oh, come on. So, but it works. I got it for inside my high tunnel because I really don't want a big, heavy, stinky machine in there because then it really stinks if my sides are closed. But it works really well if you already have a nice tilled bed. This is not an adequate place for something like this. But it works, in the right application.
Cool.
So just make sure you use tools appropriate for the job. It makes gardening much easier. I know I said it at the last. Here, dropped them way down inside. Here's my handy dandy Felco pruners. If you like nice garden tools, Felco is a really good one. They're also the only one I know of that makes a left-handed pair of hand pruners. We all know how hard it is to cut with a pair of scissors. If you're left-handed and you're using right-handed scissors, hand pruners are no different. So get appropriate tools for the job. And if you're left-handed, Felco's makes one pair of left-handed style pruners. So I'm not sure there's a whole lot more other than there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
we can never be done.
That's right. Seriously, thank you for coming out tonight.
Thanks.
As
We're glad to have
committee.
everybody come, and the community garden it's a group effort. I mean, none of us are going to do this by ourselves, and we all do the best we can to participate.
That's right. And we're all still learning too. That's the beauty of it.
Yes, we learn something new all the time.
Yep.